Hello and welcome to The Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 1993 series Infinity Crusade. Infinity Crusade is the final part of the Infinity Trilogy that started with Infinity Gauntlet and continued through Infinity War. It picks up from threads started in War that let us know that Adam Warlock, hero of the trilogy, separated out all of his good and evil from himself while he held ultimate power in the form of the Infinity Gauntlet. This accidentally gave life to those parts of him, and they have returned to threaten the universe. First Warlock's evil in the form of the Magus during the Infinity War, and now Warlock's good in the form of the Goddess. Interesting to note is that not only does this end the Infinity Trilogy, but it is also the last major event story Marvel will do for 4 years until 1997's Onslaught epic, which is still just more of an X-Men Avengers crossover. This may have been due partially to the declining comics market of the mid-90s, partially to the increased focus on graphic novels and trade paperbacks, and maybe even partially due to Marvel worrying about fan fatigue over this seemingly constant stream of major events. Hard to believe that could be a factor though, looking at the modern Marvel, a company that has done at least one major event story a year for nearly 20 years now. It may also be due in part to the quality of Infinity Crusade, but I'll let you decide that for yourself as we take this away. The comic opens with Adam Warlock brooding like an angsty teenager. Also like a teenager, he soon stomps off to his room to stare into his crystal ball. That's a thing teenagers do, right? I think it's called crystalling, and your teenager could be doing it right now. In the world of his crystal ball, he meets up with Eternity, who names the ball the Eternal Orb, which is definitely a better name for it than I had. Adam tells Eternity that he senses danger approaching, but Eternity is not concerned. He's a busy universe and has an important job to get back to, so he can't stay and listen to Adam's problems. No sooner is he gone than a figure calling herself the Goddess appears. Adam takes what feels like a rather awkwardly long time to realize who she is before she simply zaps him out of existence. Next, she appears in a room with an Infinity Gem on a pedestal. The yellow color lets us know that it's the Reality Gem, though if you've had trouble telling which gem is which color, don't feel bad. It's been a little inconsistent, and they've even presented all of them as being green. But even if you don't know the color, the Reality Gem is the only one unaccounted for, and we see the Goddess use it to attack its still mysterious owner. At this point, several heroes of the Marvel Universe start seeing religious signs glowing in the sky, and shortly after that, they each receive visits from the Goddess herself. She explains to them her purpose here, which is to end suffering and evil and bring about galactic salvation to all. The most faithful, spiritual, or most experienced with the afterlife are chosen, while everyone else is unable to even perceive the Goddess. She claims to be working for the Supreme One, the power behind the Living Tribunal, who has been active throughout the Infinity series. Guess she can't be too all-knowing though, seeing as she annoyingly refers to Multiple Man as Duplicate Man. Not sure how that got past the writer, letterer, and editors. When all the faithful agree to follow her, she builds a new planet on the opposite side of the sun from Earth to be their new home base, including a massive cathedral. This isn't Counter-Earth, which apparently has been destroyed, but a new planet they call Paradise Omega. Here, she reveals to her followers that she has taken 30 cosmic cubes, including the 5 she stole from the Magus during Infinity War, and mash them together to make a giant pink cosmic egg. In case you missed that she's a woman, I guess. She then climbs inside the egg in order to focus her power so she can give birth to a new cosmic order. We get it, Starlin. She's a lady. This is where she will spend literally the rest of the series until the very end. The faithful remain in the chapel around her to protect her from any potential threat, but mostly the series will focus on those left behind. Starlin goes ahead and hangs a lantern on the fact that the sudden rash of disappearances is very much like an earlier story he's already told, and we even get a visual callback to that story with a new tally screen of the missing. I would have really liked it if this list of the missing was an entirely different list from the original, but there is some overlap. To be fair, they did still take great care in picking who would be chosen by the Goddess, and it might be better that they didn't factor in the disappeared from the Infinity Gauntlet to the equation. The heroes actually spend much of the comic in debate over whether they even should fight the Goddess, or if she really is working for divine righteousness. Mr. Fantastic, Iron Man, and Vision do follow one of the Goddess's worshippers to Paradise Omega, where they are able to confirm with certainty, using some fancy techno gadget, that her followers are being brainwashed. Not sure how some gadget is able to detect magical mind powers like that, but whatever. That's hardly the most unbelievable thing in this story. Despite this conclusion, there are still heroes who believe the goddess might be in the right. As Professor Xavier points out, there are many among the heroes who might go to similar great lengths if they really felt doing so would allow them to achieve peace across the universe. And while her methods may be questionable, it is difficult to argue with her results. Around the world and around the universe, people are putting down their arms, giving up age-old grudges, and bringing an end to conflict. The longtime Avengers enemy Absorbing Man even shows up, looking ready to attack, but then instead he just surrenders. He says he's seen the error of his ways and realizes he deserves punishment for his wrongdoings. Unable to convince everyone that the goddess is actually evil, they agree to allow Professor X to mentally contact Moondragon, who is serving as the goddess's general. This conversation is humorous to me because when I first saw comics from this series when I was a kid, I assumed Moondragon and Professor X were related in some way. I mean, they're both bald telepaths. What do you want from me? Moondragon has, by this point, gone full tyrant with her power and can't even bear to speak to an infidel like the professor, so she blasts him with some kind of telepathic beam, leaving him catatonic. This is the final step to convince the heroes that the goddess needs to be stopped, so they pile into some new Quinjets and head for Paradise Omega. But there's a serious obstacle they face before they can do anything, and that's the orbital defense platforms, or mini Death Stars as I like to call them, surrounding Paradise Omega that the first team noticed earlier. That's where Thanos and Adam Warlock come in. What I find strange and honestly annoying about this series is that they decided to start an entirely new series focused on Adam Warlock just for this event, titled The Warlock Chronicles. What this means is that now the story is spread across 3 separate titles. Infinity Gauntlet was a nice focus story in a single title. Even Infinity War was primarily focused on the main series, with Warlock and the Infinity Watch only filling in some relatively minor gaps between panels of the main story. This comic literally leaves out important chunks of story to be covered in the other 2 titles. So if you want the full story, or even if you just want to be able to follow along with what's happening in the main series, you really need to read all 3 titles. Fortunately, the collected edition includes them all, and in the proper reading order. Unfortunately, reading the series this way is a bit tedious, because each of the titles is afraid to move the story forward too much, so that readers have the time to catch up with the other titles. This is less of a problem for the Warlock Chronicles, which focuses on Adam Warlock and what he was doing during the whole series, making it the more important of the 2 titles. With Gamora and Moondragon getting focus in the main series and Warlock busy with his new series, that really only leaves the Amnesiac, the Idiot, and the Lech in the Infinity Watch. So I guess it's basically 2.5 men. That makes this series somewhat the comedic relief of the story. While there are still points that move the plot along, they're a lot smaller in this series. There's more of a focus on telling side stories, like an entire issue that's just a battle between Thor and Drax, and another that sees the US Senator Kyle Munson and the UN force from the Infinity War Aftermath collection once again invading Monster Island, and Mole Man having to fend them off by himself. Well, himself and some giant monsters. My favorite part of this is when the Watch shows up at the Avengers HQ and Drax is introducing Maxim to everyone, but doesn't have any of their names right. I am forever calling Iron Man Iron Pan now. Also, I'm impressed with his word association between Wolverine and Badger. Most people don't even know what a Wolverine is, so I feel that's actually very clever of Drax. But mostly this series focuses in on Pip, who appoints himself temporary leader of the Watch, and since he's been hanging out with a lot of superheroes lately, he figures he knows how to deal with the danger and gives himself his own superhero costume, which is honestly pretty dumb. There's a number of jokes that follow this about how apparently he, or the costume, smells really bad, and even a scene of the gathered superheroes taking a break from their crisis in order to force Pip through a bath. The most relevant issue comes as all the heroes are headed towards Paradise Omega when Pip decides to teleport straight to the Cosmic Egg. He can do this because, as you learned if you watched my last review, with the aid of the Space Gem, he can teleport anywhere someone else thinks of if he touches them and forms a psychic connection with them. So when Professor X was speaking to Moondragon, he formed a mental connection with her, and she was already mentally connected to the goddess still inside her egg. Pip merely touched Professor X's arm during this exchange, giving him the ability to jump straight to the Death Egg zone. He touches the egg, which gives him control over it and allows any wish he desires to be granted, so he immediately turns the goddess to salt. We then are forced to sit through an entire issue where literally nothing happens except Pip thinking through all the various possibilities of what he can do now that he has ultimate power. Mostly this involves gross things about forcing women to worship him and making all women young and attractive and all men dumpy and worthless. I really hate Pip. He's stopped by this character named Silhouette who, well, first, cool name, but second, is apparently able to fold herself up and was hiding inside this little canister on the wall. You couldn't have shut him up a little bit earlier, Silhouette? The Warlock Chronicles pick up on Warlock after the goddess banished him. It seems she sent him to this bizarre LSD dimension, where he's found by this guy Darklore and his very familiar Merlin. They help Warlock recover and point him toward a rip in reality created by the goddess attacking the Keeper of the Reality Gem. So Warlock follows along the path of the destruction to rescue the Keeper, and it's finally revealed to us that he is Thanos. What? Seriously? I can't help but feel like that's a cop-out. I mean, who didn't expect it to be Thanos? Especially with all the talk of how poor of a choice Warlock made with the Keeper of the Reality Gem that they've been shoving down our throats. I was really hoping to find out that Thanos was the obvious foil and the Keeper was really someone else. My disappointment aside, Thanos and Warlock once again agree to once again work together to once again stop a dangerous alternate version of Warlock. I mean, it's kind of their thing. Mephisto shows up to offer his own aid in defeating the goddess, which does bring into mind further questioning of whether the goddess is actually doing the work of the angels. But, as Mephisto and Thanos discuss, if the goddess's goal is elimination of all evil, then she can't really do that without also eliminating all good, and that would leave people lacking in sentient spirit, as Thanos puts it. I really enjoy Warlock's reply to this discussion, just a cool, I manage, which, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but he kinda is managing without good or evil. So Thanos, alone, agrees to Mephisto's terms for his help in stopping the goddess, which is one cosmic cube from out of the cosmic egg. Here, in an issue of Warlock Chronicles, we get literally the only, and by far the most important, explanation of exactly what is going on here. This starts with an answer to the question I've been asking since my Avengers vs. Thanos review of how the cosmic cubes are actually weaker than the Infinity Gauntlet. Mephisto's answer is that they're not. Not really. The difference is that the cosmic cubes actually began as sentient beings that went through a lengthy metamorphosis to become semi-sentient polyhedrons. Because of this, when they become their cube form, they started out deliberately limiting their own abilities to prevent being used in certain ways. Primarily, this means doing things like killing people outright or total stellar genocide. But those self-restrictions can be overridden if the goddess can just get enough people to believe in her and her will, which is why she has made her purpose into a faith that she is spreading throughout the galaxy. Although Mephisto can explain the why, they still don't know the what. Warlock attempts to answer this question by returning to his Eternity Ball and speaking with Eternity again. Instead, he just walks in on him in Infinity, having what appears to be weird Infinity sex. Awkward. Eternity and Infinity say they do know what the goddess is up to, but they don't feel it's important to them, and annoyed at Adam for interrupting their sexy times, they send him back to bed with no snack. Luckily, Adam manages to figure out what the goddess is up to all on his own, and in order to reveal his plan to Thanos, gives the Titan his Soul Gem. The Soul Gem communicates to Thanos Warlock's plans before zapping Adam back into the Soul World so he can go confront the Magus. This proves pretty pointless though, as the Magus, as you can probably guess, has no interest in helping Adam. While still on Soul World though, Adam is confronted with the reality of the goddess, and learns that his feminine side has grown bitter from constantly being denied through all the cycles of Adam's life, and now she's angry and wants to harm the universe, not help it. Or something. I can't help but feel that the point of a lot of this story for Starlin was to depict women in a more positive light than they normally get from comic books. To that end, the important characters here are the goddess and her primary generals, Moondragon, Gamora, and Silhouette, who are all women. But we can't really ignore the fact that they are depicted as the villains of the story, and that at best, the women under the goddess are being duped into serving her. There's also the fact that the entire conceit of the story seems to rely on Starlin suggesting, essentially, that the goddess is too temperamental to handle the power and responsibility that comes from her mere existence. So you could kind of see this at best coming off as feeling like benevolent sexism, or at worst like offensive misogyny. There might be a reason for all that though, but I'll get into that later. Whatever the case, Thanos and Warlock realize that their plan requires helping Earth's heroes in their fight against Paradise Omega. So Thanos finds Silver Surfer, who was originally a follower of the goddess, but was kicked out when he developed doubts about her plans. Knowing Surfer draws his power from stars, he sends Surfer to the Earth's sun and has him overcharge. Then he flies straight to Paradise Omega and blows up its moon, creating just the distraction the Earth's heroes need. A battle commences down on the planet with both sides fairly evenly matched. Earth's forces seem to be most aided by Maxim, who is a bit of a wild card as nobody knows anything about him or can apparently detect him. This advantage is eliminated when he tosses Hercules out into the ocean, which Moondragon recognizes as the same move he used against Drax when they first met Maxim. So, she warns her troops to be on the lookout for him, although since nobody knows who he is, she doesn't use his name, instead just saying to be on the lookout for a rather large black man. To which Storm replies, I wonder what she meant by that. Whoops. Awkward. Thanos uses the distraction of the battle to get down to the egg, where he attempts to use the soul gem to break through the goddess's defenses and steal her soul. He quickly realizes he's too late though, and the rapture begins. I love the depiction of the goddess's ultimate goal, which turns out to be to make every star in the galaxy go supernova, which was actually just Thanos' goal the first time he gathered the Infinity Gems. We see it spread across the universe and wipe out various people, and I especially enjoy when we see it kill a person on Earth who's reading a comic, and it is clearly the 2 pages of this very comic that the panel appears in. So meta. After the rapture ends, we suddenly see that it never actually happened at all. Adam was able to show up at the last minute, and his connection to the goddess allowed him to use the cosmic egg to create the illusion of her end goal happening without it actually happening. We then see everyone coming to their senses in a reverse of the rapture images, including yet another meta shot of someone now reading these 2 pages of this comic. Nice touch. Warlock and the goddess proceed to fight, but it quickly enough ends as you would probably expect it to, with her being sucked into the soul gem to live her life out, just like the Magus, as but a ghost to the ghosts in their new ghost home on Ghost World. Thanos uses the egg to send everyone home, then proceeds to set it to self-destruct to prevent anyone else from using it. He still finishes his agreement with Mephisto, though, removing out exactly 1 cube and giving it to the devil. Mephisto then turns around and attempts to strike down Thanos, believing that any cube removed from the egg after the goddess reached her goal would similarly have its self-imposed limits removed. And he may have been right, but Thanos outsmarted the devil on this one. While he did agree to give Mephisto a cosmic cube, he points out that Mephisto made no specifications on whether the cube had to be in working condition or not. So the containment unit Mephisto wields has no power. It's a pretty good moment, even if it was pretty expected. I do love seeing the devil get tricked. It's not quite as good as Black Panther straight up punching the devil in the face, but I'll take it. The comic ends with Thanos warning about the promises of gods and devils, saying that it's better to be the miracle you're waiting for, rather than waiting for some divine being to deliver it to you. Man, Thanos really needs to make some motivational posters. With that, let's crack this egg and get to the breakdown. I really like the base story Starlin was going for here. He clearly wanted to tell a completely different style of story with each part of the trilogy. Gauntlet was primarily an action story focused on giant cosmic battles at the end of the universe. War was primarily a mystery, with its characters simply reacting to the overly complicated machinations of the Magus. Crusade is primarily a debate between the concepts of extremes, good versus evil, faith versus logic, male versus female, which, honestly, might explain why the mixed messages on empowering women. I've always been a fan of stories that are willing to point out how faulty arguments of pure black and white can be, especially when they have direct, self-aware statements about the concepts of black and white. But splitting the plot over 3 titles stretches it almost to a breaking point, making it hard to follow if you just read the main series, and particularly boring and annoying if you read all 3. Also, though I have a lot of respect for Ron Lim's art, it is at some of the worst I've seen from him, with a lot of awkward proportions and poses that probably come from being overworked by having to do a third, double-sized, major event story filled with a crap ton of characters. And his art, even at its worst, is still some of the best art in this collection, with the other 2 titles having some pretty ugly art. I especially hate the Warlock Chronicles with its very 90s art and colors that just do nothing for me. So that's why I'm giving this series a recommendation level of medium. I feel like it's a really good idea done rather poorly, which is pretty much the opposite of Infinity War, which I feel was a really bad idea done surprisingly well. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you've been enjoying me going through the entire Infinity series. I'm not actually done. There's still about 2 comics left in the series, with a 3rd I could also cover if I feel like it. But I am going to take a little break so I can cover some other things, and hopefully you'll understand why when we get to that. Hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.